Hey, how are y'all today?
Good.
Right. Let me, so today we're going to go over the chapter 4 homework and then go over chapter 5. And chapter 5 will be doing Wednesday. Hey, good morning, everybody.
Yeah.
That was traumatic. I'll talk to you about. Okay. Leo Aber? Ashley? Okay, so good morning, everybody. Today we're going to go over the chapter 4 homework and go over chapter 5. Chapter 5 homework's due on Wednesday, and then there's the first exam is going to be a week from today on Monday. So this exam, in this class, the exams are predominantly multiple choice. I'll let you know on Wednesday. It may be all multiple choice. So make sure that you really read the book. The material's not that difficult. It's 5 chapters because it comes the multiple choice questions come from the test bank. So make sure that you look at the slides, the notes, and have read the book. There's also 2 articles. If you go, if you look under chapter 5, there are somewhere there on Moodle, you'll see it. It's either under chapter 5 or where the first exam is. There's an article on leasing versus buying a house, or renting versus buying a house, leasing versus buying an auto. So we're going to make sure you read those articles. We're going to discuss them on Wednesday, and then there will be some questions on from those articles on the exam. Okay.
Is it like recalling questions? Like, do you recall this happening, or is it more like, okay, this was the article stated, can you apply it?
Both. Okay, it's both. It's an application and recall. Yeah. So I would say more recall probably than application. They're like, for example, you should be able to just, it may be converted to multiple choice, but like, what are some reasons for buying a car versus leasing a car? When might it make sense to buy a car versus leasing? Same with the house. When might it make sense to, this is something we're going to discuss, it's not in the book, but when might it make sense to go with a 15-year mortgage versus a 50-year mortgage? Or when might it make sense to stick with the 30? Those are a couple examples of maybe some application questions. Okay, so the homework in this chapter was kind of it was subjective, but so let's see what you came up with. So for number 1, your parents are retired and have expressed concern about the really low interest rates because no one can make any money, basically. And so this financial advisor has a surefire way for them to have higher returns. If you heard that from your parents, what would you tell them? Amanda?
I would say that since interest rates have been low in the past few years, it's just been due to a lot of different economical changes. And so therefore, just depending on like the bond or security that you want, you're just gonna have to be aware of like a few things, such as like the amount of time on the bond or like just other long-term results.
Okay. Anybody else?
I think that, I'm saying it's a surefire way of higher interest is like a red flag.
That is a huge red flag. Yeah. That brings Ponzi scheme or some other crazy thing going on for sure. Yeah. So, and the thing is, if you have to, when you talk to older people about investing, you have to really consider their tolerance for risk. Because, for example, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the markets. The markets are officially in correction mode. The stock market is in correction mode. It's really been going down for the past month. It's overall, the returns have been down for the past month. It was up a little bit yesterday. Today it's down. The NASDAQ tech stocks are selling off. They're down like 2% today. So the point I'm making is, if you told somebody, yeah, you can't make any money in the CD or in saving, putting your money in savings, you should go into the stock market. And if they don't really have a high tolerance for risk, and then they're caught in a correction like this, they can be losing sleep over it. So I guess it all comes down to diversification. I'm for putting money in the market, but for older people who have traditionally had all their money in savings, probably putting some in bonds, in the, say, a corporate bond, mutual fund, some government bonds, and then some stocks that pay dividends. For example, you can buy exchange traded funds and mutual funds that invest in dividend paying stocks. For example, one of the most popular ones out there, an exchange traded fund that I recommend to people who ask me what if they should be in the market. It's called SPYD, and it's an index. It's the S&P 500 index. Remember, the S&P 500 is 500 largest companies out there. But if you want to just buy stocks that that focus on stocks in the S&P 500 that pay dividends, this is perfect. This SPYD, and so that's one example of what you can, what someone can do if they want to make a little higher return and not without so much risk. All right. So for 2 years supposed to do a web search. So let me just ask you, what did you come up with here? What is your, would you go with a full service bank? Would you try to go with a credit union? Would you try to go with the online banking? What did you find out there? Brianna?
I felt like most of them were kind of all the same. Like they all offered pretty much the same stuff. It wasn't like oh, credit union, and then a little savings institution was just savings. Like they still offered like all the types of accounts.
Yeah.
It was hard to find just one.
Right. Well, one thing that I've noticed is, and this ties into, this is for this question. This is what I was thinking. I have an account at the Navy Federal Credit Union, and then I also have an account at the Whitney. And so I found that the Whitney charges, the last time I looked, they charged for, like if you did an ACH transfer to someone, if you wanted to transfer money to somebody, set up automatic transfers, they would charge you for that, whereas the credit union doesn't. And then a lot of these banks will charge for the online banking. And so that's something to look at. I mean, what I mean by not online banking, I'm sorry, online bill paying. So online bill paying is a really big deal now. It's a huge convenience, but I don't want to, why should I pay for the, for that service? So those are some things you might want to look at when you're transferring money. To me, the biggest things are when you're transferring money to people, ATM withdrawals, you want to have those free. And then the online bill paying, you want that to be free too. So those are some of the key things to look at, I think. Okay, your ATM card or your debit card is stolen for and they withdraw $950. What happens if you report that the next day? How much money are you gonna get back, according to the federal regulations?
You mean how much you're responsible for?
How much are you responsible for?
$50.
Yeah, you're responsible for 50. I actually had an issue with the debit card happen to me. I used it at a gas station a few years ago and then found out it was skimmed. And so this is the craziest thing. I'll share this quick story with you. So I'm up in Memphis visiting my daughter. She was in school at the time, at optometry school. And so the Whitney calls me. It's like 4:30 on a Friday evening. I almost didn't answer the phone because I thought it was a sales call. And so they say, have you made, we have these irregular purchases on using your debit card. And so I said, well, I just was at this I was at this hotel. I forget the name of this famous hotel with the ducks in Memphis. And I said, I just bought something in Memphis. And they said, oh no, it's not that. They said there was $105 purchase at a Walmart in Chalmette. And then 45 minutes later, there was $103 purchase at a Walmart in New Orleans. And then about 40 minutes later, there was a third purchase at a Walmart in Ketter for $105. Oh, okay. I was thinking they didn't want to go above the 100, but you're right. They were probably buying a prepaid card. So gotcha. Yeah. So anyway, so it was a huge hassle. I wasn't out $50. They recovered the whole thing, but it took almost a month to get that taken care of, right? I didn't have that money in my account. I had to go to the Whitney and fill out these forms, and they're asking me these stupid questions like, do I shop at these? Do I ever make purchases at those establishments? Well, of course, it's Walmart, you know. So anyway, they make it a big hassle. So that's when I really stopped using my debit card a lot, because they said if they would have had your PIN, as you know, they would have just wiped out the whole account. And so you've got to be careful with a debit card. But anyway, you would be liable for $50. But most of these companies are not they're not going to make you pay. They will. It's been my experience that they'll reimburse you for the whole thing. So really, what are the lessons of that, or what should you take away from this question? Look at your statements online. We kind of ran out of time in the last chapter, but I was going to tell you, most of us don't balance our checkbook like our parents and grandparents do, or we look at the bank statement and balance it to the penny. I don't do that. I think probably most of you don't. You can look at it online. I know what's coming and going in and out, and just as long as there's money in there, I'm good. I just, you don't have to take the time to balance. Well, most of you don't write checks anyway, so why would you balance your checkbook? But as long as you look at it online and are aware. So getting back to this, if you look at if you get alerts, or if you look at your account fairly often, daily, you would find out things like this happen. So what if you waited 6 days? What do the federal regs say after you wait 6 days? You actually would be responsible for $500 if you waited 6 days. And then if you waited 65 days beyond the 60-day limit, you're going to be responsible for all of it. So again, you need to make sure that you're looking at your stuff, and looking at your accounts. Okay, you're getting married and are unhappy with your present bank. Discuss your strategy for choosing the bank and opening an account. Consider the factors that are important in selecting your bank, such as ownership of new accounts and bank fees, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so, this is what I was talking about. This is where it's really important with the ATMs. Will they reimburse your ATM fees at these banks? What are the fees for all these little things? Do they charge a fee if you keep unless you keep a certain minimum balance? So what were you thinking on, what did you put for this one? Leah, what did you put for this one?
I put
I put, when opening a new account, there are a few things to consider such as services and costs. Does each institution offer and what at what cost? But customer convenience, ease of access, services, number of drive-throughs, business location, number of patients and offices, safety, is this bank or institution safe overall? Interest rates, does the bank or institution offer beneficial interest rate?
Okay.
And then, but you also must consider service charges may be lower for a joint account. Joint accounts offer access to every joint holder. Rights of survivorship exist with the joint account. Secrecy is difficult to be maintained.
So you mentioned the right to survivorship. That's a big deal with these joint accounts because if you just have an account in your own name and something happens to you, it can be difficult for your spouse or your beneficiaries to get access to that account. They have to wait until it's probate and all this. But if it's a joint account, then it just goes to the joint holder. So you can designate beneficiaries on an account. You can have a payable at death situation where you can avoid all that, but it's easier just to have a joint account. So like if you have older relatives, which you all do, it kind of makes sense as you get older, especially to like your grandparents. Hopefully, if you just have one surviving grandparent, they have one of their children on that account. So that just makes it easier to do business if something happens. And then if they need money for something, it's easy for them to write a check off of that account. The other thing I wanted to mention was here they're just really talking about banks and credit union savings and loans. But you can actually use Schwab and Fidelity for banking in some ways. And this is what I mean by this. If you open a brokerage account, so let's say you open up an account with Fidelity or Schwab. You open an IRA account, but then you open up a regular brokerage account. You can have that money there in cash. You can put it in stocks and bonds or whatever if you want to. But in this brokerage account, you've got your money there. It can be sitting there in cash, earning a small amount of interest. And they will send you checks if you want. They'll send you a debit card. And if you use the ATM, any of the ATMs around the country to withdraw money, they'll reimburse you. So it's really kind of nice. It's a good deal I think, to use that. I don't know about Fidelity because I don't have experience with that, but I know that I'm sure they're the same though at Schwab. But Schwab, they'll give you checks, give you a debit card if you can, they'll reimburse your fees. So do any of you have debit cards with Robinhood? Because I know they're pushing that. I'm not doing that with the Robinhood. They're pushing that. They probably reimburse with the ATM fees too. Okay, anyway, that's it for chapter 4. If you have a hard copy, go ahead and turn it in to me. Anybody else? Okay, so it's been a lot in the news. The market's in correction. We were having a discussion. Somebody asked a question last week when we were talking about chapter 3, something of how do rich people save money or something, and the answer was offshore accounts. So over the weekend, this huge article came out. Ron, are you prepared to talk about that, or you want to?
Yeah,
Okay.
wing it.
Yeah, tell us about this crazy article about.
Okay, so there was this big drop, I think it was yesterday, they did it. It was the Pandora Papers. And it was, they got it right here, it's 11.9 million records that were actually obtained. And it was documents, it was all kind of files, PDFs, and it's actually dealing with, let's see how many people they had in there. They had over 336 politicians that were involved, and a lot of really high influential people, including singers, entertainers, things of that nature. And it's all about how they hid their money in offshore accounts in different countries. I think British Virgin Islands, Belize, and I was just telling you too, I think also South Dakota was, in the United States was holding $360 billion for some people that are actually criminals that actually
Yeah.
have committed, stuff against, I think it was for like labor, all kind of labor disputes and,
Yeah, and South Dakota's doing it legally and
Right.
with using the laws in that state, it's in trust. That was the most shocking thing of all about.
yeah, me too, because I didn't think it was, I mean, it's just one big building they showed in the video and it was like, okay, right,
Yeah.
360
Right.
billion is,
Right.
and it's all really like, really super secret, it's probably like the NSA.
So I hope the Justice Department will go after, I'm sure they will, they'll go after those who they can, the US citizens they'll go after. This happened a few years ago with what was called the Panama Papers. But this is a much bigger data breach. So the Panama Papers, they published all these names of these people who had this money hidden in offshore accounts. Trump was one, I think Trump's name was on there. Putin was on there. Putin's name was on there. And he just millions and millions of dollars that he's basically stolen from Russia, from the Russian people. And he just ignored it. And it just finally kind of went away. Well, he's on in this again because
His girlfriend,
he has, supposedly there's a woman that he had a child with. And she has this multi-million-dollar house in Monaco. And that came up on the papers. Some Saudi or some Middle Eastern king, Hussein, some
I think from Jordan.
Jordan has purchased $100 million invested in beach homes in Laguna Beach, or Malibu rather. Anyway, it's crazy when you it really does. You know, we've been talking for years now about equality and diversity and all this. But then this is just kind of a slap in the face about how, yeah, their life really isn't unfair. And there are these elites who are not playing by the rules, think they're above the law. And so hopefully the Justice Department will come down on them. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's called the Pandora Papers, if you have to read them.
How many people you think is gonna die from this? Yeah, if you're reporting this.
Oh, I don't,
They were actually won't be able to put their pictures down here.
yeah, I don't know, but, nothing is, with the internet, with the technology that we have, nothing's really, you can't really hide anymore. The other big news was, did you hear about the Facebook whistleblower from Facebook?
I think that's one, so I had one about that.
Yeah, so this whistleblower from Facebook, she was on 60 Minutes last night. And supposedly Facebook has been basically putting profits over people, putting profits over doing the right thing. And after Biden was elected, they shut down their software that would track people who were basically trying to how should I say, trying to instigate riots or instigate demonstrations and stuff. They shut that all down after Biden was elected. And then, so this whistleblower is saying that Facebook actually contributed to what happened in Washington because the Capitol, because they didn't track all this. And so she has all these memos and basically showing this, how Facebook over the years has just, they don't really care. They don't really care what's on Facebook. They don't care about teen suicide, which is the largest the largest cause of death among teens is suicide. And so they just, it's going to be interesting to see what happens because they're down about 4% this morning, Facebook is. But no, there haven't really been any advertisers yet who have pulled out. But if advertisers start moving, then that'll definitely hit them in there, at the bottom line. So we'll see what the fallout is with this. But I think another issue, which is good for us, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but Apple is doing the right thing. And so what Apple is doing now is you're not automatically defaulted before, if you had an iPhone or whatever, or a computer, you were automatically defaulted to where all these advertisements could track you. But now they've changed it to where you have to opt in if you want to let these advertisers track you. So that's a huge problem for Facebook and for all these social media accounts, because that's how they make their money. And most of the people are not going to opt in to that. So anyway, that's also in the news today. Okay, did anybody bring a current event besides Wendy? Okay,
It's not related to those.
okay, go ahead.
Last week, somebody had mentioned that, I think it was Charles Schwab was going to financial literacy classes last week.
Okay,
I actually found an article about a bipartisan bill that's been introduced to Congress, called the Piggy Bank Act. And they want to give high school students $300 to deposit into a savings account. And then after that, they'll match up to $25 a month. And the students just have to take a financial literacy class.
okay,
And then later on, after they graduate, they can withdraw money for paying for education, starting a business, buying a house, or medical hardship. And they said that the goal is to increase financial literacy, because only about 57% of Americans are actually financial literate. And
Schwab is gonna do this?
no, this is like a bill.
Oh, this is a bill, the federal government will do
Right.
this?
Right. But it also said at the end of the article that it's actually like the third bill that they've tried to pass similar to this in the last few years, so.
Okay,
Get to see a vote.
so say that again, they'll give you
No.
300?
They'll give the students $300 to deposit into a savings account, and then if they save up to 25, they'll match the 25 a month.
Okay, that's a brilliant idea, I think.
And they just have
Yeah.
to take, in high school, they have to take a financial literacy class
Okay.
to qualify.
That sounds like a nightmare to actually institute that, I mean, it's a good idea to condition kids. for
Well, my thought
savings.
was that, yeah, it's gonna be expensive to pay for, but if you teach people to basically take care of themselves and be responsible with their money, they won't need like public assistance later on if they
Mhm.
financially secure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and I'm already thinking of this, if they called me as an expert witness to testify, I would show my own version of statistics, which would, I do the future value of somebody who, got the 300 from the government, saved 25 a month, and the potential money that they could have versus somebody who just doesn't know. You can't act on things that you don't know about. And a lot of people don't know.
And not only that, it's not something that's taught in school, and like parents that aren't financial literate can teach it to their kids, so it'll kind of bring that into the future.
Right, exactly. And a lot of people, they're not financially literate, and when they hear things in the news about, they don't hear the positive things, like when they hear things in the news, scary things about, the market is in correction, or the market has gone down, people have lost all this money from 2007, 2009, the last recession. And so they just, no one in my family ever invested in the stock market, and really, pre-1980s, I would say, only really wealthy people are people who really were educated and knew about finances, invested in the market and had a broker. But it was really, investing in stocks was just seen as something that wealthy people did. And people, middle class, most middle class people and working class people were afraid of the market because they were afraid of losing all their money. And so this will help. This will definitely help if that passes. Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, since we have an exam on Monday, how about, would anyone like to bring in an article for Wednesday? Okay, Matthew. Anybody else? Okay, Matthew, that's good. Okay, give me a minute. I'm going to pull up chapter 5.
The exams on chapter 1 through 5?
Yes, yeah, so the exams on chapter 1 through 5, it's going to be multiple choice. I'll tell you, I can give you more details on it on Wednesday. You can bring a formula sheet, but I'll let you know on Wednesday. I don't think that you would even need a formula sheet for this class, honestly. But I'll give you more details on Wednesday. I have to look over the material. All right, let me share the screen and pull up chapter 5. All right, so this is an interesting chapter. It's on housing decisions and automobile decisions. Two of the biggest purchases you're going to make in your life: buying a house, buying a car. Okay, so let's look at these. These are pretty interesting, these facts versus fantasies. So for most people, the automobile will be their second largest purchase. You think that's true? Yeah, it is. So a home is considered the largest purchase for most of us. Automobile is the second largest purchase. So what's going on with the automobile industry these days? Yes, really bad shortages. There's a chip shortage. I know people who have bought cars before COVID and have sold their cars for more than the purchase price. And so there's this huge shortage of vehicles. And so people are making money. Now, typically what happens with a vehicle, typically, as soon as you drive that vehicle off the lot, what happens? It depreciates. When is in what year of a vehicle's life is the largest amount of depreciation? The first year. So that's why a lot of people, the really smart thing to do is to buy a slightly used car. Buy a car that's about a year old. It'll still be under warranty. And this is what I found to be true, which is if I was going to buy a used car, I would, this is one way to do it. Go to some of these high-end dealerships, like go to the BMW dealer, go to the Mercedes dealer, go to the Lexus dealer. And so you have these wealthy people with money to burn, and people are crazy with their cars. We have a friend who traded in a car after like just a few weeks because he didn't like the stereo. I mean, it's really stupid stuff. So, I mean, you can find these wealthy people who have just bought these high-end cars and they just want to trade them in for another high-end car. And so I found you can find some really nice cars at decent deals at the high-end dealerships. But anyway, unless you really like the smell of a new car and have to have a new car, you can save a lot of money by just buying a slightly used car. And the way cars are made today, they're pretty maintenance free for quite some time. And so you can research the cars and different models and see what the reliability is and all this, and then they'll have a track record, and then you can get a used car. And that's one way to save some money. So anyway, automobile is our second biggest purchase. This next one, the most popular form of single-family housing is the condominium. Okay, that's false. The most popular form of single-family housing is a house, is a home. So what's the difference? If you buy a house versus buying a condo, what are the main differences if you live in a condo versus a house? The common space, right? So when you buy a house, you own the land. Of course, you're responsible for everything. You own the land, you own the building. And I found this really interesting. When you think about property houses, the value of property, it's not really so much the dwelling, it's the land. It's the underlying land that goes up that really makes these property values go up so much. And so it's really important if you, go ahead, Matthew.
Talk about that. I have relatives in Nebraska,
Uh-huh,
and there's this lake, like man-made lake in Nebraska that uses a reservoir,
mhm.
but they lease the area around it for like lake houses. So I was always curious to how valuing those leases work since they don't own the land, it's just a lease. But I know the government would one day, okay, all the leases are done, and all those people just lose their money.
They say that, yeah, that's an interesting situation. That's reminding me of Portofino. Have you guys ever been to Portofino in Pensacola? Do you know what I'm talking about? So when you go to Pensacola, as you're coming across the bridge, you see these, it's like 5 towers. They built these huge condos called Portofino. They're probably about 15, 20 years old now. Anyway, that land is leased. Because in the state of Florida, evidently, on the beach like that, the land has to be leased. It's some kind of 100-year lease. So but you're right. It's, to me, it's in the back of my mind, what's going to happen in the future. I wonder why that land is leased in Nebraska, though. That's interesting.
It's really nice. Everybody used it because it's good lakefront property.
Mhm. And it's government land.
Yeah,
They didn't want to sell it.
profit.
Right. So yeah, so I mean, some land is leased, some land is in certain areas, the government leases it. If you want to buy property down in Mexico and it's within 3 miles of the coastline and you're a US citizen, or if you're not a Mexican citizen, the land is leased, it's a 100-year lease. So that's another issue. But anyway, getting back to the typical home versus a condo. With a home, you own the land. With a condo, you don't own the land, you just buy that unit. And so with a condo, you have the common areas and then you just own your unit. So what would you think, what are the pros and cons of having a house, of owning a house versus owning a condo?
Probably a little more freedom, other than if you have a HOA.
Yeah, so with a house, of course, you've got a lot of autonomy, it's your house. But you're responsible for the insurance and you're responsible for the upkeep. With a condo, the homeowners association, the HOA, the condo association, they keep up everything. You're responsible in Louisiana with a condo and in most other states, you're responsible for what's called the paint in. So think about the wallboard, everything from the paint of that wallboard in, including the floor, the draperies, the appliances, everything you're responsible for. So you would just have to get a condo insurance policy, which is really just a contest for that stuff. The HOA is responsible for everything else. So they'll have this huge policy and then you have to pay a monthly fee. But the biggest problem with a condo, well, here's the upside of a condo is you don't have to worry about all this stuff. The downside of the condo is we have this elephant in the room, so to speak, out there where these condo fees continue to go up as insurance and taxes, as insurance goes up, these condo fees just continue to go up. And then you have all these people who are trying to be able to get along and agree on things. And that's an issue too. So if you ever get in the situation where you're thinking about a house versus a condo, with a condo, just keep in mind that you do have these condo fees that can go up. But if you really don't, if you like all the amenities and you don't want the upkeep, a condo might make sense for you. With a house, you've got to pay this insurance, you've got to pay the taxes, and flood insurance. In October, they're saying the flood rates are gonna go up. So we'll see how bad that is. Anyway, so that's the difference between a house and a condo. Okay, so this next one, closing costs on a home are rather insignificant and seldom amount to more than $800. So is that true or not, the closing costs?
Usually like thousands.
Thousands.
Yeah, there, you can figure on paying probably 5,000 maybe in closing costs on a house. And that's negotiable. There's usually certain closing costs that the seller pays, certain closing costs that the buyer pays. You can agree to split all the others. Sometimes they'll have the buyer pay them all, sometimes they'll have the seller pay them all, it just depends. So it's a good negotiating point. The amount of money you earn has a lot to do with the amount of money you can borrow. Of course, the higher your earnings, the more you're going to be able to borrow. Okay, mortgage insurance guarantees the lender that the loan will be paid off in the event of the borrower's death. No, that's not true. Mortgage insurance, well, there's two different kinds of things. There's insurance that you can buy, there's term insurance that you can buy that covers your mortgage if you die. But what they're talking about is PMI, the primary mortgage insurance. So typically what happens is if you don't put at least 20% down on a house and you get approved for a loan with less than 20% down, the lender wants you to pay for PMI, which is this primary mortgage insurance, which means that if you default on the loan, they'll be able to cash in that insurance policy and get their money. It's expensive. It's about around $100 to $120 a month typically for this primary mortgage insurance. So it's best to try to get your down payment and not have that insurance. But if you can't, then try to get your house down to the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 percentage as soon as you can, so you can get rid of that mortgage insurance because it is expensive. Okay. And then last but not least, the ever popular adjustable rate mortgages. Payments will change periodically along with prevailing interest rates. So what are these adjustable rate mortgages? What does that mean? Matthew?
Adjust your mortgage payment based on change in interest rates.
Exactly. This is one of the reasons why we had the whole housing meltdown in 2007 to 2009, because people had all these adjustable rate mortgages. Well, when interest rates are low, so let me just explain this. Typically, if you went online and looked at mortgage rates, you'd probably find a 30-year loan at around 3% these days. So a 30-year fixed loan is 3%. You could probably get an adjustable rate loan for probably 2.25 or 2.5. And so people will get these adjustable rate mortgages because they have these lower teaser rates. And so, let's say you can get a loan for the 3% fixed, you get a loan for 2.25% adjustable, which is a really good deal, right? The problem is interest rates are historically low right now, right? They're only going to go up. And so what'll happen is after that first period of usually 3 to 5 years, then the rates adjust. And they can adjust up depending on your mortgage. They might go up 1% a year. They usually cap at a certain amount. And so that's what happened. That was the first straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, with this when we had the whole financial crisis, because interest rates started to go up, and then people couldn't make these mortgage payments. Their payments, and some of these loans, these adjustable rate mortgage loans were really bad. Like they were going up 2% a year on people. And I mean, imagine that's that can mean over $200 a month more you have to pay. And so people started defaulting because they couldn't make the payments on these. So I don't recommend adjustable rate mortgages. I've had a couple in my lifetime and it's worked out for me. You can use them to your advantage, but it's a little risky. When interest rates were higher, I had a loan with an adjustable rate mortgage. And then I just refinanced it once it started to adjust. So there's two reasons to buy an adjustable rate mortgage, in my opinion. If you're going to not be in the house very long, then an adjustable rate mortgage makes sense because you get that really good rate. If you're going to sell the house within 5 years, it's a good deal. I've been in that situation too. If you stay in the house, then you can refinance. But I read this one article about this person during the whole mortgage meltdown. He had bought an adjustable. He bought a house with an adjustable rate mortgage, thinking he could refinance. Well, then he got sick, and then he couldn't qualify to refinance. And so life happens. So you don't want to put yourself in a bind. And with interest rates being so low right now, there's really no point of going with an adjustable rate mortgage. I don't see the point of it at all. So it's not worth the risk. Okay. Anyway, that's the facts and fantasies. All right, so buying a car. We have so much more information at our disposal now. You can go to a car dealership, knowing how much they bought the car for, knowing what the car is worth, knowing what the resale is worth at wholesale and retail. So I mean, these car dealerships and these sales people are really dealing with a much more sophisticated client now. So you can, knowledge is power. And with the technology that we have today, we can really, we're in a lot better position. Now, I was listening to the news this morning on the way into campus, and they were talking about the Ford just reported, and they think what Ford is saying, Ford had a good report overall. And what Ford is saying, what a lot of analysts are saying is that they think that this chip thing has hit bottom. This chip shortage has hit bottom and is now turned the corner, and we're going to see things start to ease up a little bit. But the other thing that they're noticing, there's a big change in how people are buying automobiles. People are ordering cars because most of the dealerships don't have any inventory, or so little inventory that there's no point of going to the dealerships anymore. So do you think that's going to change people's habits once the cars, Wendy?
Yeah, I mean, I know people do it now. There's, is it CarMax, where like deliver the car to your house? You can really there to see it.
Yeah, that's also probably a pretty good way to get a used car, is through CarMax. And they'll let you keep a car for a few days and test it out too. So yeah, it's the climate is changing for these traditional car dealerships, where you come in and haggle with them and look at a car. A lot of people are just ordering cars. And then some of them have the no haggle thing, where you can just have a certain price. There's just a certain price, and then that's it. Costco, actually, you can buy a car at Costco in California. It's just one, it was a Toyota or a Honda, I forget what it was. I actually saw it, but you can, and I thought that was interesting because I was out in California and Costco was selling this car, and my husband and I were helping my mother to buy a car, helping with the negotiations. And she had called this Honda dealership, and guess what the first thing they said to her was, well, we can beat Costco's price. So they were really in tune to that. And these dealerships, of course, they want to stay in business. So they're undercutting these types of things. So anyway, make sure you do your research before you buy a car, and that'll save you some money. There's a lot of information out there now for cars. Okay, so affordability. As a rule of thumb, try not to have the car payment be more than 20% of your monthly take-home pay. So I know a lot of people go over that, but that's a good rule of thumb. And then also, think about the operating costs of a car. The older a car gets, it's gonna be the more it's gonna cost you. So, in my family, we've always had this argument of, should you trade a car in? When should you trade a car in? Should you just keep a car till the wheels fall off? Or should you trade a car in, get a new car that's under warranty, blah, blah, blah? What do you think? What's the best, from a financial planning perspective? What do you think?
I think it depends on the situation.
Okay.
If you still have a Toyota in the car that you want to trade in. Not that the dealership generally doesn't do as much for resale property.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So if
Nobody
you're like
brings that.
ahead and you don't mind getting a lower, because like I know when I traded my last car in, I was like $1,000 over with so like it took $1,000 off my new car, and then have to go through the hassle trying to sell.
That's a hassle, yeah. Well, here's the thing. This is important. If you trade in a car, you actually save on taxes. Let's say you're going to buy a $20,000 car, and you're trading in a car. They're going to give you $4,000 for it. So your purchase price is $20,000. They're going to take that $4,000 trade off off of the 20,000, so you're only gonna pay taxes on 16,000. So whenever I run the numbers, I would have to sell the car typically for $1,000 or more than I would get for the trade-in. And so usually we can talk to the dealership into giving us the trade-in, and you get the tax benefit. And then you don't have to hassle with selling the car too. But, so, you know, at some point, it's probably better over in the, I mean, I guess the overall answer is, it's probably better to keep a car longer. Because think about this, if you theoretically, let's say you got a 4-year loan. If you got a 4-year loan on a car, you paid that car off at 4 years, and then continue to save the payment for another 4 years, maybe by the 5th year, you could pay cash for a car, theoretically. And so you're better off if the longer you keep a car, that you're better off. It's more economical. But there comes a point when the car might cost too much money. It might nickel and dime you to death. So at some point, if the car's breaking down, that's so expensive, then it would make sense to trade in the car. But what a lot of people will do is they'll look at the depreciation, and usually like in the 3rd year or so, that's when the depreciation goes way down on a car. And so they'll trade in a car while the value is still relatively high because they want a new car. So, you know, it all comes down to, it's just not all about money. It all comes down to, you want a nice new car that has a lot of the new safety features, but like the backup cameras are awesome. Do you guys all have, I don't know how many of you are driving cars with backup cameras? Once you get a car with a backup camera, you will love that. That's like the best safety feature, I think, since seatbelts. It's awesome. Anyway, just keep in mind that, you know, at some point, it's good to keep a car longer, but at some point, it's not worth it because it breaks down too much. All right, so this is the best deal, is to buy a nearly new car. So this is something that I've done sometimes. You can go to a dealership and you might get a car that's a loaner, or a car that's just recently been traded in. And so I told you how crazy people are with their cars. So let me give you this example. I'll give you this quick story. So this was last fall. I don't know if you guys remember, but we had this hurricane where we were closed. School was closed for like an entire week. And so my husband was searching on the internet for a VW Golf R. There's not very many of them that were made, and they're fast cars, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, he finds this car in Tennessee, and it was like less than 6 months old. And so he's negotiating with the dealership. And I said, well, you know, I'm off for the whole week. If you really want to get the car, let's go up there and get it. Okay, so you might ask yourself, why would somebody trade in a car like that that's less than 6 months old? So the guy at the dealership, the salesman, tells us the story. This guy bought this car. He spent $6,000 putting all this stuff on it, and K&N, air intake, all this stuff. His wife, and he didn't tell his wife that he had spent all this money on it. And then she freaks out. Plus she says that the car is too fast and not safe for their baby, and makes him trade in the car. So we got this car with all this stuff on it. And because the car was less than like a year old, I forget the exact date, but if a car is not very used, you can still get a new car loan. So the point I'm making is, if you can find these cars like that have been traded in really quickly, or more commonly, we've bought cars in the past that the dealership has used. You know, they just use them as demos, and they have they might have 500 or 1,000 miles on it. So the car has to have, I think it was like less than 5,000 miles, and then be a certain age, and you can still get a new car loan on it. The reason that's important is because the interest rates on a new car loan are much lower than the interest rates on a used car loan. So you can buy these nearly new cars, and you can get some pretty good deals out there. Because as I said, people are, you know, when we talk about when we get into the investments chapter, we're going to learn how people are not rational with their money. They're even less rational with automobiles. I can tell you that. So anyway, you can get some good deals out there. And then if you buy a used car, you might be able to get more of a car, a nicer car than you want. So I would not recommend buying a car every 2 years. That's gonna be way too expensive. And then,
That's what my dad does, buys a new truck every 2 years.
because he probably will tell you, Brianna, the depreciation,
I don't know, he just needs a new truck every 2 years.
Yeah.
Or they just crap out on him anyway.
really, well, he must put in a lot of miles.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So, and then also think about the size and the body style, and think about your life. Are you gonna be getting married soon? Are you gonna have kids? You can't have a 2-seater sports car with kids. So, and if you have a third kid, then you're gonna looking at a minivan with a third seat, a third row. So you have to think about a car that will fit in your lifestyle. Okay, so test drive the car. Again, you can look up all this stuff and know what the dealer's cost is beforehand. So if you know their cost, you can just tell them, hey, I know what your cost is. I'll give you 3% markup. Or I'll give you 4% markup. And when is the best time to buy a car? I'm talking about during the month. When is the best
At
time?
the end of the month,
Exactly. Why?
because they're trying to get those numbers.
Yeah, they want to get their numbers. They got to get those monthly sales numbers in. So if you go towards the end of the month, that's a good time to buy a car. They're definitely willing to deal with you. Okay. All right, so we've been talking about buying a car. Why would somebody ever want to lease a car? And would it make sense to lease a car? When might it make sense? Matthew?
Some people, like as far as, do when they want an expensive model, but they know they're not gonna have it for more than a year. So,
If you really want a nice car, if you want a luxury car, and you can't afford it, the lease payments are gonna be less. You can lease a car for less. So if you want a nice car, then yeah. you can lease it.
Maybe the people that go like to years.
Exactly. So let's go back to this. If somebody said to me, if someone said to me, oh, I have to have a new car every 2 years, I would say you should probably be leasing a car. So some of these dealerships have some, you can find some decent lease deals. But the dealerships, yes, Brett?
Hey, talking about the lease dealership, did you ever hear about there's a thing right here, they call it car subscriptions? It's like a lease, so what you did was like, let's do Nissan, since everybody kind of knows that. You can go for like $6.99 a month, and you can get an Altima, a Rogue, a Pathfinder, SUV, or a Frontier pickup truck. And at any time during the month, you can tell them, okay, I'm tired of this Altima. I need a Frontier. We're gonna go camping this weekend. So, and then they'll have a concierge that comes over and drops it off to you, swaps out the vehicles.
No, I haven't heard of
It
that.
includes the insurance and everything. And then you can go to another tier, which would be $8.99 a month. That would be the Leaf, which I don't know who would want the electric hatchback, but you can get the Maxima. You can get the Maxima, the Murano, and the Armada, and the Titan pickup truck, and you can also get the 370Z.
That includes the insurance and everything?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, so if you wanna go to the beach, man, you can just pick up a 370Z. Tell them you want one with T-tops or whatever. And then you can get the GTR. It says, but only for an additional $100 a day. But that car is $110,000, so.
Huh, that's interesting. But then, the devil is in the details.
That's the insurance, and it says all maintenance, everything, so you don't want anything.
But
Of course, you gotta put the gas in.
it probably
Come on,
got a
guys.
mileage cap on it. I wonder if there's a mileage cap on it per day.
It doesn't say that, but then Audi has one, Porsche has one, BMW has one, Volvo.
Yeah,
I think the leasing is becoming a bit more popular.
it is. They've got better deals on leasing. Porsche is really having trouble. People
Yeah, I
don't-
think I think they're trying anything here.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, this one right here for Porch, one of them is, $2,100 a month.
That's interesting. I mean, if you, obviously you're paying a premium for that,
Oh, yeah.
but if you want to switch up cars, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
And then you could really figure out what kind of car you wanted and then buy that car. So the dealerships, I'm sure they like that because they're making money off of it. The dealerships like leasing because they make a lot of money off of leases. You lease a car, okay, typically you put something down if you want to, because it'll lower your lease payment. You sign the lease, you're usually relegated to only 12,000 miles a year. And you have to have, you keep the insurance, you do all the upkeep on the car. You have to have insurance on a certain level. And if there's any dings and such on the car, when you bring it back, beyond normal wear and tear, they're gonna charge you for that. Where a lot of people get in trouble is with the mileage. Because if you go over the mileage, they charge you per mile and it gets really expensive. So it's a great deal for the dealerships because they're getting all these lease, they're getting the money from the lease. And then they get the car back and they get to sell the car. And so that's where you can also get some pretty good deals if you go and buy a car that's been leased as well. So I think when might it make sense to lease?
Cousin in Texas, when he moved to, went to law school, got his degree, when he moved to the city to start practicing. And he was kind of from the country, so he got trucks and stuff. And when he went to the firm, he got a Mercedes, because everyone was driving a Mercedes. And he was the one that was leasing and stuff. So, I mean, he's not very long-term planning with his money. So I don't know if it's, a good decision or a bad decision, but it seems that people who don't know if they're gonna want the car in 2 years, especially an expensive car.
Yeah, if you want to trade in a car every 2 or 3 years, you might be better off leasing. Yeah, if you can get a good lease. So if you have low mileage on the car, you're not going to put 20,000 miles a year and you want to trade the car in, then maybe it makes sense to lease. Also, if you have a business and you can write the lease off, real estate, whatever, then that it also might make sense to lease. So one of the homework problems is to figure out this lease versus purchase worksheet. And basically analyzing the lease versus the purchase. So you can use this worksheet. So basically with the lease, you've got your initial down payment, security deposit, the terms of the lease, the monthly lease payment, what the total is, the interest rate earned on the savings, because if you put money down on a car, if you bought a car, you have to put more down. So you're earning interest on the money that you're saving from the purchase. So you can go through that example in the book before you do the assignment. And then, so anyway, this is the lease. And then this is your purchase worksheet. So you've got a down payment, sales tax, the monthly payment, total payments. And so this is the big deal right here, number 17. The estimated value of the car at the end of the loan. Okay, so that's why most work, and I don't remember how it comes out in the worksheet and the homework problem. It might come out in favor of the lease, but typically it comes out in favor of buying a car because of line 17. Because when you buy a car at the end of the loan, or when you've got the car, you have the trade-in value of the car. With the lease, you don't have any trade-in value. And so that's usually what puts you over the edge with buying a car, why it makes more sense to buy a car. Okay, now, then there's a similar homework problem, renting versus owning. So let's talk about that. What do you think about renting a house or renting an apartment versus owning? So we just went through Hurricane Ida. So now we're all thinking about insurance, we've got taxes. You think it's better to rent or should you buy? Wendy?
I think it's another thing that just depends on the situation. If you're living like, buy a house, that's way more expensive than if you rented. Not to mention some places have really high property taxes, but have to. And down here, yeah, you don't have to worry about insurance as a homeowner, but a lot of people that are renting apartments and stuff that keep out of their apartments. Like the office.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised at that, honestly. At the number of people who have been evicted because of damage. They're just so worried about liability, I guess. The landlords are. But, so the renting versus leasing, you can, in fact, if you want to bring an article in, you could do a rent versus buy, not rent versus lease, renting versus buying a house. Occasionally, and after the last housing downturn, there were a lot of articles out there who were telling people you're better off renting than buying. And they were talking about the cost of insurance and the property taxes and all this, and how you can, the money that you're saving from that down payment, you could invest. I really felt that they were doing a disservice to people, and I would tell the students in this class, you know, if you're older and you want to downsize or retire, it makes sense. If you want to sell your house and go to a luxury apartment or something, that makes sense. But if you're 20 or 30 or 40, I don't think it makes sense to just say, oh, I'm going to rent, because this is what's going to happen to you. Home prices will go up. They're going to go up and down, but on the long run, we'll go up. And what's going to happen is you're going to be retired and you're not going to have a house that's paid off. You're going to be retired and you're going to be paying rent. There's people out there who are trying to decide between getting their prescriptions filled and paying rent, because they never bought a house their entire life, and now they're priced out of the market. So I think that overall, you're better off buying a house. But it depends on the market, because the housing market, you know, it depends on the area that you're in. If you're in an area where prices have gone way up and maybe will come back down, or if you're in an area that you're not going to be in that area for more than 3 years, then it might make sense to rent. So you just have to think about your situation. But when Trump was elected and changed the tax laws, we went through the tax chapter. The standard deduction is 12.5 for single, 25 something, 25.1 for married. Well, most of us can't take the deduction anymore for interest on our house. We can't deduct the property taxes. So that's a big negative on buying a house, because that used to be a huge savings for people. But still, I think you're better off buying overall than renting. Just look at how much property values have gone up in the last few years. So, but anyway, again, it's a personal decision. So, and then if you're gonna buy, you think about whether it's a condo or a single family home. So this is what I would do personally. If I moved to the city, I would think about buying a condo versus maybe a house if it's more expensive. And here's why. If I was in a job where I might not be staying there forever, and I wanted to buy something, it's a lot easier to rent a condo out than to rent a house out. And by easier, I mean it's a lot less stress. I've heard horror stories of people trashing houses. Well, with a condo, you can't really trash a condo. Yeah, you could trash the inside, but that can be fixed with a coat of paint. So there's less maintenance if you wanted to buy a condo and keep that condo and rent it out. It's easier to be a landlord of a condo than a house. It's less stress. Okay, so why might people rent? Let's look at some other reasons. Well, most people are renting. This is the biggest reason, actually, because this is the biggest headwind of buying a house, is people don't have down payment. Typically, you have to have a 20% down payment, and most people don't have. That's the biggest problem for most first-time buyers. Or they might not be settled. A lot of people don't want the responsibility, especially older people. This makes sense. If you don't want all the upkeep of a house, then you should probably rent. And so if you think about this, somebody who has had a home for 30 years, 30, 40 years, they sell their home, it's paid off, they would pocket all that money. They could invest that money in safe investments, relatively safe investments, a mix of cash, stocks, and bonds, and pay rent in a luxury apartment, not have to worry about it. Go to the gym, go to the pool, play tennis, not have to worry about the taxes and the insurance. And they're making money off of the investment. So that makes sense for older people. I don't think it does for younger people because you haven't built up the equity. So, and if, you know, you can look at, there's this thing called the Schiller Index, where they look at, this guy named Schiller actually called the housing bubble last time. And the way he did it was, you look at the ratio of rent to mortgage payments, monthly mortgage payments to monthly rent. Well, what happened was the cost of home buying, the cost of buying a house was much higher than the cost of renting. They should be in a long run equilibrium. And when the cost of buying a home gets so much higher than the cost of renting, that Schiller Index, when it's really high, that can be a sign that the market's going to go down. So what do you think's going on? What's happening right now with the housing market? Would you be trying to buy a house right now if you were in that position, or would you maybe be waiting for a downturn? What do you think?
Shortage for a while, but that's been done when it's on a balance now.
There was, right, we have the situation right now, interest rates are historically low. When interest rates are really low, that fuels the housing market. That makes prices rise because you can afford more house when interest rates are low. So that's one reason. The second reason is because of COVID, just there's a shortage of a lot of supplies. So there's a shortage of housing right now. Now that's kind of balancing out. And as interest rates start to go up, we're going to see housing prices maybe come down a little, or the housing market soften a little bit. So you can, I mean, you have to decide if you, you know, depending on the area that you live in, if you think housing prices will come down or they'll continue to go up. In the long run, they're going up, so it's better. I think it's safer just probably to buy. This is an extreme situation. And then, so another reason, Mike, to rent is if you think you can make more money in the stock market on your down payment than in the house, then maybe you should rent. So. Now, this is another thing. This isn't the Schiller Index, but this is called the rent ratio. So what they do is they look at a ratio of renting versus buying, and your mortgage payment versus your rent. And so if these colors, the light yellow to green, it's cheaper to buy in those geographical areas. So at the time that they did this, it wasn't cheaper to rent in any area, even out here in California. So here's Louisiana, and it's much cheaper to buy than to rent. And if you think about it, with these rates being so low, your mortgage payment a lot of times would be less than you pay for rent. So that's kind of makes it kind of a no-brainer right there. Okay, so there's this worksheet too, when you buy versus rent. So look at this and work through this for Wednesday. But I wanted to mention two things here on the purchase worksheet. So this first one is just you figure out the cost of rent, and then on this second one, okay, line 8 and line 9, I would just eliminate these, because line 8 is the tax savings due to your interest deduction. Well, if you don't itemize, most of us can't itemize anymore. There's no more tax savings on interest, on your mortgage interest. So just don't even do that, draw a line through that. Tax saving on property tax, you used to be able to deduct your property tax. Again, you have to itemize. So most people have lost these two deductions. So those are two of the main reasons why people would buy. Now, typically, when you come down, it's just like the buying a car versus leasing a car. when you think about the renting a house versus buying a house, this is the big deal right here. Number 12. What do you think is the annual appreciation gonna be on the house? And you can do a Google search and see, or look at Zillow for the zip code and they'll tell you. So the appreciation of the home price, this is the factor that usually puts it over the edge where you're better off buying versus leasing. But certainly insurance and taxes and the maintenance costs are weighing on home buyers, especially insurance in certain areas. Okay, we can finish the rest of this. On Wednesday, I want to show you an example of how much money you would save if you had a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage. So, but anyway, you have enough info to do the homework, so have a good day, and I'll see you all on Wednesday. And chapter 5 homework too. Yeah. Hang on, let me. Did you guys, Max and James, did you have any questions? Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to sign off.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I downloaded the homework folder